One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. It's a great show today. All of them are great, but truthfully, not all of them are great. I won't tell you which ones I think are not great and which ones I think are great. They're all great. Anyway, that's not the point. That's not why we're here. We're here because we've got Anthony Kennada on the show. Anthony, we've all known about Anthony because he worked with Nick and the team at Gainsight to make customer success a new category. Regardless, I don't even have a point of view on the Gainsight product, although I'm sure it's amazing. What I know is that Gainsight created customer success and made it a household name within the world in which I operate. And I think Anthony had a tremendous amount to do with that. And so having him on the show is amazing. He's the new chief marketing officer at Front, which is another company that feels like it could be the next Slack or the next Gainsight or just something very, very big in the B2B space, because I think they've already got 5,000 customers and they're growing very, very quickly. So that's fantastic. And he's written a new book called Category Creation. So I think this is going to be a great interview. And we're going to learn about what they did at Gainsight to help build that category of customer success and how to take a company that was 100,000 in ARR and how to turn it into a 100 million plus ARR company, over $1 billion worth in valuation. And also how Anthony himself challenged himself and forced himself to continue to be the right head of marketing at every stage of growth, which is highly unusual and incredibly admirable when we see it happen. So it's a great show. Now, before we get there, we want to thank our sponsors. We've got a new sponsor on the show today, so we're super excited about it. Actually, they're not new as of this point, but I'm reading the copy for the first time. At any rate, it's DocuSign. We all use DocuSign. We use DocuSign to get things signed all the time. Every sales org feels the pressure to close deals faster. Take control with the DocuSign Agreement Cloud, a suite of tools that automate sales contracts and quotes all right in your CRM. Create custom contracts in a click, sign them digitally, and automatically pull data back into your opportunities. See why more than 500,000 businesses use DocuSign with a free trial and discount exclusively for Sales Hacker listeners at go.docusign.com/sales hacker. That website again is go.docusign.com/sales hacker. And of course, our second sponsor is Outreach. Outreach supports sales reps by enabling them to humanize communications at scale, from automating the soul-sucking manual work that eats up selling time to providing action-oriented tips on what communications are working best. Outreach has your back. So without further ado, let's listen to this great interview with Anthony Kennada. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. Today we are honored and excited to have on the show Anthony Kennada. Anthony is somebody that most people in the startup ecosystem have heard of at this point, because he was the person, or one of the people, part of the team at Gainsight that helped create Gainsight with Nick Mehta and the other folks at the company, helping take that company from $100,000 in ARR past $100 million. And now he is the new chief marketing officer at Front, and he's going to tell us all about Front. We're incredibly excited to have Anthony on the show. And the final thing that we'll say is that he just released a new book. The book is called Category Creation, and we're going to be talking about how to build a great category and why brand is such a great driver of business growth, perhaps the most fundamental driver of it. So, Anthony, we're super excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. You guys having me on.
We're excited to have you. So we always start with this thing called a baseball card. So you literally, when did you start at Front as CMO?
2 weeks ago today. So very, very recently.
Well, congratulations. For those out there in the world, we're recording this on November 18th. You're probably listening to this sometime in December, but Anthony's been there two weeks. What does the company do?
Yeah, so Front is taking a super interesting approach to this whole kind of future of work kind of category. We know that regardless of what business we're in, email is at the heart of how we communicate. And we've tried, we've built all these different solutions that help us like be productive, be it, different applications that we go to do for internal collaboration, or, different places we store our files. We have all of these different tabs in our life that kind of populate our browsers and our apps on our phones. But at the heart of it, email is still the heartbeat of how businesses operate. And so what Front's done is sort of like beef up email for businesses with the hopes of making us both more productive and ultimately find more meaning in our work, because we're able to focus not just on busy work for the sake of busy work, but work that matters and drives impact. So that's kind of what the company does. And I'm super excited to jump in and help kind of continue a lot of the momentum that they already have.
I will, if it's okay, I would love to unpack that a little bit. But
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about sort of the financing, whatever revenue you're allowed to share. It's okay if it's very little. We understand confidentiality, but give us some of like the funding and revenue growth rate, parameters so we can understand where Front is at in their journey.
Yeah. So the company is just Sequoia backed. Originally, it was a YC startup. And so they've raised, I think I'm pulling it up as we go, about 80 million total.
Wow.
It's a Series B. The last investment was a Series B by Sequoia. But yeah, the company's growing pretty quickly. It's one of those kind of product-led growth stories where, we have over 5,000 customers already using the product. And honestly, it's been pretty cool as a marketer to kind of come in now and help build some of the dedicated go-to-market on top of the sort of organic growth that they've already seen that's kind of skyrocketed their success already. So that's probably, I don't know, about as far as I could say, I guess, but like it's pretty, well-funded, large customer base across many different industry verticals. I mean, think about the TAM is so big. Anyone with an email address effectively could be a customer up front. So they've done, really, really well. And I'm excited to kind of help play a part of this next chapter.
That's awesome. And it's awesome to come in as, one of the early marketers at a company that has 5,000 customers already. Yeah. That's exactly what you're looking for.
Totally.
So Anthony, you talked about Front's mission and you talked about sort of improving the way that people use email specifically. And then you also referenced making work more meaningful. Tell us what you mean by that.
Yeah. So, the first kind of iteration of the company really focused around this use case of a shared inbox. And it's this idea that, we've got these like sales at, support at type of inboxes, but rather than having those be sort of a single channel that you email kind of one person on the other end, you can bring the same dynamic of distribution lists into kind of the entire kind of email world that anyone within an organization has. So what you're giving basically is shared visibility into kind of the information that's happening within an organization. And so no one's really dropping the ball on being able to respond and take action quickly. But the other idea is now, how do you collaborate around this content without basically forwarding an email around? I think we've all like dropped the external person off the thread and had that kind of internal dialogue. But what if you can add sort of some of that kind of collaboration layer that sits on top of the message to be able to get the answers you need quickly internally and then respond to that customer fast with the right information? So that's kind of the idea for how they've sort of unpacked email outside of just being this like, asynchronous kind of effort and made it more collaborative. But how you connect that to meaning is you're able to really kind of take a lot of the stress out of the inbox. I don't know about you. I like the Sunday night as I'm getting ready for my week, like I'm in my email kind of prioritizing, like understanding kind of the effort ahead for my Monday morning. And it definitely like, casts kind of a scary kind of window on Monday. But if you're able to better select the types of emails or better prioritize your week because of rules that you're configuring around how your email is kind of routed throughout the business. You can assign certain tasks within your emails to other people on your team. It's sort of like email not just being something that we work for, but that works for us. That's kind of the vision of how they can help kind of reduce a little bit of the anxiety that comes with work through email and create a little bit more meaning in that effort.
Cool. It's, I think it's a noble effort. To your point, I always feel like sometimes responsiveness as a determinant of, I guess, like work performance is always sort of a strange metric or KPI or something like that, because responsiveness is other people send you a message and how quickly do you respond to their message. And oftentimes your inbox is other people's to-do items for you, but not necessarily your to-do items for the world. So hopefully Front can help address some of that.
Yep, that's right.
Cool. So we love that you're at Front, but we knew you for a long time as one of the early employees at Gainsight that helped build the category of customer success.
Yep.
And I think that there's probably a lot of people. And the other thing that I really, I don't know you very well, but pat you on the back for, but also Nick on the back for, is that you were the person that was able to make that transition from very early stage all the way up to 100 million and not get layered, so to speak. So Let's go back to the beginning of your journey. Like, tell us how you got started in marketing or even in sales. What was your background and how did you find your way to Gainsight?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think there's always this kind of chasing the ghost of getting layered. And so I think my background maybe helped, uniquely put me in a position to fight that ghost. And so, and the big reason is Gainsight was actually my first real marketing job. I started out of college in 2008 as a tech recruiter, which in 2008 was probably one of the worst jobs you can have. Getting people jobs in a recession was not great. So the company didn't do very well, but I was able to, cut my teeth on a little bit of the outside sales, kind of outbound prospecting kind of motion. And I did successfully get an engineer at Box to accept an offer. And so I called my hiring manager in Box to basically ask them for a shot on their sales floor. And fortunately enough, they took a chance on me. So I came in to Box as the 37th employee. So pretty early days for the company, really when they were moving from being this consumer-oriented file sharing company to positioning as SharePoint up in the enterprise. So that's where I sort of fell in love, I guess, for lack of a better term, with startup life and with, just SaaS and cloud computing and, all that good stuff. So I was there for a few years, and then I actually met Nick Maida, weirdly enough, at our last company, Live Office, by replying to a Craigslist ad that he put out for a business development manager.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I met Nick on Craigslist, which is pretty fun.
That's awesome. We want to know what else happened in that first meeting.
Yeah, exactly. No, we hit it off, honestly. Obviously, if you know Nick, he's definitely hard not to get along with him. But he and I hit it off, and it was pretty cool because I was pretty young, but had an opportunity to run an OEM relationship that they just signed with Symantec. And so built that business from a BD perspective to about 15 million of ARR. And we ended up selling that company to Symantec. And so I transitioned then from sort of more of the go-to-market function, so sales, BD, to product, because I thought that part of what I really enjoyed was just building things and talking to customers and translating those kind of use cases and requirements into something that engineers can go and build. And so I ran a product team at Symantec for a couple years. Unfortunately, it was a tough time at Symantec. This was a couple CEOs ago before the company is split from Veritas. And so there was, just a little bit of turbulence there. But as that was sort of happening, Nick finished his 6 months on the other side of that acquisition and told me about a company that he was going to join called JBera Software that was based in St. Louis, Missouri. A very unassuming opportunity. But that
was before the golden touch of Kennada had been there too.
Something like that, yeah. So it was, what I knew was I'd follow Nick blindly into the dark, whatever he was going to go, be a part of. I wanted to be a part of it too. Two, the company actually had some pretty good early logos. And so like Marketo was a customer. Some of these B2B SaaS kind of darlings, I guess, were supporting whatever it is that this company was building. And there was a lot of upside from a marketing perspective. So yeah, we basically rebranded the business and launched Gainsight out of that. But yeah, that was my first gig in marketing. And I think that was sort of an eye opener for learning how to basically bring first principles into the job, which is something when, only looking back, we say we help create this category. You needed a little bit of first principles to really be naive enough to take a risk, but also, I had to. And so some of the first principles that help shape our marketing strategy at Gainsight, I think are slowly today now becoming more and more kind of a core part of the new way B2B companies are going to market. And so it's been fun to kind of grow up in this kind of new chapter of our industry.
Well, let's talk about that. So first of all, how did you learn, or did you already have a predefined, did you have a point of view on what marketing is? Because actually that word has a lot of different definitions depending on who you ask.
Yeah.
And then what were your first principles?
Yeah. So I think we did a lot of the things that I basically could find on a Wikipedia entry for what B2B marketing is. So we drew a funnel, we talked to the analysts, we said, look, we should probably do some webinars. We came up with the basic blocking and tackling. And so my understanding at the time was, product positioning and then effectively driving demand gen is really what marketing is. And that's it. Obviously, there's a lot of iterations through that. But the challenge we had was the analysts were giving us advice after we pitched them and got them on the phone with our customers and they saw the demo that aligned to their research areas. So they said we were predictive analytics for customer support. So they wanted us to position against a Zendesk or something. We're that doesn't feel right to us. Or we have, you guys are CRM 2.0. We're like, that doesn't feel right either. So realization number one was, gosh, it doesn't really feel like the analyst's advice is mapping our conviction for what this business could become. The second thing was the traditional kind of paid media kind of way of sort of buying our way into some traffic and some building our database didn't really work because people weren't searching for customer success. And so we're like, okay, well that's I think part of the 101 guide to like building a marketing kind of engine, and paid wasn't working for us either. And so these were some of the signals, and maybe the third was the competitive landscape, where there actually weren't a ton of competitors. There were a few folks operating at the fringes, but it wasn't this like, there wasn't an incumbent vendor that ran away with the customer success market at the time. So the traditional tactics there proved to be kind of, confusing for us. And so the first principle we followed was an observation that there was actually a job called the customer success manager. And we didn't invent it. We think Salesforce, gets the credit for inventing that role. But this was a group that would like meet, around the Bay Area and like these very informal community meetups. And there was so much like excitement that and passion that they were finally around other people that were thinking about things they were thinking about, not dissimilar from Sales Hacker and everything y'all built with, folks that come together in cities to talk about how to grow their sales career. But, there wasn't this person, this brand in the marketplace that was serving this customer success buyer and community. And so the bet we made was, what if we just found a way to champion them? Since they carried the bag for this thing that we were building, like, let's just serve them and champion them, help them bump into each other, define some of these best practices, create some content around that. And maybe we can build a great company along the way. So that was sort of the first principle kind of idea that we had that ended up really turning into the entire 7-year marketing strategy for the business.
Wow. So, and were you like reading, that book Play Bigger? Like, were you aware that you were creating a category, or was it sort of you backed into it? Because one of the daunting things about this concept of category creation, which we'll talk about since you wrote a whole book about it, is it's a multi-year journey. Yeah. And I mean, it's even more sometimes, I know that we read stats like, 7 years to IPO or 7 years to some exit for early stage companies, but category creation can be a 10 to 15 year journey. Yeah. And that can be pretty daunting for people for a CEO that just raised some amount of money and needs to hit a revenue target, tomorrow. That feels like maybe too long-term for their short-term needs.
Yeah, totally. Well, we use that. I know this is, I think, borrowing from a famous Goldman Sachs quote, but long-term greed, right? Like this can't be clearly there is a faster path to, call it the public markets or whatever the case is, by just having a disruption kind of mindset, building a better mousetrap, innovating on the business model. Those are things that I think can help you kind of drive to success kind of faster. But I think that category creation in general has this like almost like higher calling associated with it, because you're building a brand in a marketplace that's serving a underserved persona or a constituency that hasn't really been catered to in a meaningful way. You're kind of building a company that you're sort of bringing these teammates and employees along on this journey where they're helping create that value, and they're betting their careers on you as the category leader to go and do that. And at the tail end of that 10 to 15 year journey, or whatever the numbers show, honestly is a higher multiple, according to HBR, more market share for the company that's able to create and go on and dominate it. So in the early days, we had no idea that we were doing this at all. We just said, there's this niche group of customer success people. What would it look like if we got them together in person? And we did this event called Pulse that helped kind of fuel the movement for us. What would it look like if we built the online home from a content and best practices perspective that helped fuel an inbound marketing kind of machine that drove 80% of our revenue, influenced 100% of our revenue. And all of this stuff, fast forward 7 years later, that little niche group is the top 3 fastest growing job in the world, according to LinkedIn, for the last 2 years running. So like you see the stuff starting to work out and you're like, gosh, like I guess, some of these things helped at least play a part of this profession kind of becoming more mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely. So Pulse was like the first when you seem to be orienting around like that was like one of the first big things, because you mentioned bringing customer success managers together.
Yeah.
Was it that concept of, you going to Nick and saying, I think we need to do a conference. It'll be 50 people to start. It'll be 200 people next year, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Except it was more like Nick coming to me saying, you need to do a conference. We saw like the community groups, right? It was like pizza and beer and soda, like nothing fancy. And we still picked up on that energy. And so Nick was like, gosh, there was like 30 people at that thing. And it really, like there was something very compelling about that. We should do one too. And at the time we had like 8 customers or something along those lines. So we knew it wasn't going to be a user conference. And so we said, let's just, mirror that community group that was coming together to share best practices around the profession of customer success. And let's try to do it at scale. And so we were pretty, I think it was a timing and a number of different things, but we ended up getting 300 people at the first event. And we saw it was like full conference, like, AV staging, like hotel.
Had you done one of those before?
I helped Box with their original partner conference called Altitude that became BoxWorks. And in college, I was a concert, like whatever, like marketer.
You're an events guy.
I think like I had the seeds there. I never like did it like at scale, but the seeds were there. But we had a really good team around us and some good agency partners that helped us pull it off. But that was the bet. And being in that room with 300 people and Jeffrey Moore and Aaron Levy and all the excitement that kind of was surrounding it, that helped spark the movement. And we kind of kept doubling down from there.
That's great. Are you don't have to give as much detail as you're comfortable, but like, what was the size of that initial bet? Was it $100,000, $20,000? Were you selling tickets to it? Were you hoping to offset costs?
Year one, we justified as like a write-off in a way. So we said, we're going to sell tickets because we want people to ascribe value to this thing and show up. And so, I would never give it away for free. If I did, I'd expect like a 50% show up rate. We're able to get consistently over the last 7 years, about 80 to 90% by charging. And so even though that wasn't, recovering much of our cost wasn't the primary driver, we knew we can get like people to show up by doing that. So we ended up spending about $250K for 300 people.
Wow.
And again, that's a lot.
That's a lot of money for 300 people.
Totally. I mean, it's 4 seasons in San Francisco and no sponsors. So, we made that decision. I think for a lot of companies, you can say, look, maybe there are some ecosystem partners we can pull into this thing. We can help kind of kickstart the kind of conference program together and offset some of that cost. Maybe it doesn't have to be at the Four Seasons on Market Street. Maybe it could be somewhere else. So
Hampton Inn.
Yeah, Hampton Inn. The Radisson SFO. So, there's other ways to do it. But I think for us, we said $250K is basically like, a 2 sponsored kind of content pieces with like Forrester or something. Like, let's try it. And I'm glad we did. I mean, that was honestly where we really kind of took away the idea that if we double down on the movement and on the people behind this movement, that we can build a big software company on top of that.
And is that, I'm trying to think and I'm so curious about this because I'm trying to understand in my own brain where I first heard of Gainsight and where it became synonymous with customer success. But I've known about Gainsight from, 2000, it must've been 2010 or 2011 or very early on when I was at a company called Axial. And, and I'm just trying to think like, how did I hear about it? And it must've been something to do with Pulse, and it must've been something to do with, some of the content you were creating. I'm sure like a blog post or something.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, we definitely oversubscribed on writing content and finding different and unique ways to distribute it. So, I mean, one of the ways you might have heard of us in an effort to build our marketable database, because obviously it was very small in the early days, we would do a lot of partner webinars. And so we would go do something like a Zuora or a Marketo or Box, these other companies, and we would have them be a special guest on our platform, and then they would promote it to their audience, and we would grow our database through basically brand leverage from some of the partners. So we did a lot of work there with trying to tap into the ecosystem. We then honestly took a lot of content and tried to get it out in front of the at least Silicon Valley SaaS audience first as kind of the early adopters. So we took out like a billboard on the 101 just to get the Gainsight name out there. So early days, it's kind of fun to just, find ways to get the brand recognized and exposed in front of the right audience.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into this book that you just put out. So the book is called Category Creation.
Yeah.
What's in it that we haven't talked about? What are like the core principles that you are trying to indoctrinate out into the world?
Yeah, no, appreciate it. And you mentioned Play Bigger earlier. There's definitely, I found once we started recognizing that, gosh, I think we're creating a category here. We started looking for resources to help us figure out how to do this. And I think Play Bigger does a pretty good job of, explaining kind of like why is category design important and, what are some underlying principles to consider. I think the challenge for us on the operator side was, I believe, like I'm bought in. In fact, we're invested into this journey, but gosh, how do I talk to my CFO about this? How do I show up to my pipeline meeting like next week and talk about some of these investments we're making? $250K for a conference when we're at 8 customers, like, that's insane.
It is insane.
Yeah. What kind of reps do we hire, right? Like that are kind of going to be doing a lot of value selling versus like selling into an existing line item budget, for software. So a lot of this stuff and like how to take like all the goodness of what category creation could be and operationalize it into a framework that, a CEO, a CFO, the board can really appreciate. That was kind of the idea behind the book. And so this is sort of like the operator's manual to how to actually do it, how to create the category. And so some of the things that cover in the book, like first is like to live your purpose, your values, and your culture out loud. And it's this idea that, especially in early markets, companies that want to build a brand that is sort of leading that market has to sort of think about inspiring folks to follow them. And so the idea of like, I know it's kind of cheesy, Simon Sinek's start with why. It really is true. People really want to buy why you are sort of on this mission. And like, having this kind of transparent relationship with your community is really helpful to kind of bring that community along with you as you're sort of taking them down the road that they've never been down before. And so I think that's something that's been pretty important. The second, and we covered a little bit of this already, but like focusing on the people in your market, not just your products. And so there were other customer success solutions along the way that have taken a purely product driven approach, right? We can predict churn with AI, like things that are like removing any sort of humanity that might be involved with some of these buying decisions. And so, we think that building a brand IP as well as product IP is something that helps buyers and users kind of self-actualize along their career. They want to get promoted. They want to solve a problem. They want to kind of, find meaning in their careers. And so your product is a big part of how you operationalize and scale that. But so is just like, your content marketing efforts, your ability to like help them solve some challenges through best practices and strategy and all these different pieces. And so focusing on helping them kind of build the how for executing the category vision is critically important, and not just having the best product in market. The third thing is this is kind of weird for a B2C company, but I think Sales Hacker, you guys are like the golden standard for this. Create a lifestyle brand for your category. It's like a total B2C thing, but this idea that we have Disney Plus now. I can watch any Disney movie or Marvel movie. It's insane, from like my iPhone anywhere, I am. Amazon Prime, I can get anything delivered like within 2 hours with Prime Now. But then like all of these amazing, delightful consumer experiences. But then I go to work and I'm literally just automating email by like basically spamming people until they have open rates. And like, it's insane how as marketers, we've taken the humanity out of marketing. And I think Sales Hacker and a lot of other great companies have said, look, let's actually like flip this around and build a brand that's literally doing life with people in sales. So you want to find a job, you want to get trained, you want to get certified, you want to find community, like whatever it is that appeals to you on your journey in your sales career, we want to be a partner to you on that path. And that's what we did with customer success as well. And so I think that's really, really important to building a brand in B2B, which for so long has been this like other in the marketing stack. So I can keep talking all day. I mean, there's several others. It's, growing a community, doubling down on live events, activating your customers as brand ambassadors. So don't just be the only one talking about your category. Get your customers to do it on your behalf. Not overcorrecting on analysts, as you heard from our early story. I think that model is a bit, perhaps, it's changing at least. I won't say it's completely antiquated, but it's changing. And customer voice is more powerful than ever before with things like G2 and Trust Radius and all those areas. And then just establishing trust between your executives as the face of this category with the world at large, and how marketing can help play a role in scaling that trust with the world. So these are some of the topics, but we think these are the recipes that really helped us and other companies like HubSpot and Drift and many others do the same thing in helping build their respective markets.
Yeah, I think all of it's really, really interesting, and it's really good advice. I do have one question. What is the way to pitch the CFO on 250? That do you have a framework in the book, or how do you justify such a long? I mean, or is it just teaching them like, listen, this is we're AIDA. This is just the awareness phase, but call me in 12 months, and this pipeline will have become customers.
Yeah. So I do have a whole chapter on this. I think the example of being a newly minted Series A company writing a check for $250K for a conference, I appreciate that's a risk, right? And that I would tie that specific example to a CEO that deeply believes in the power of what this could become and willing to kind of take a risk that may not pay off. And so that's a little bit hard to model, but I'd say, let's say you're along your journey and you want to kind of pitch this long-term greed belief and philosophy and say, hey, I want to invest in things that may not scale and really help kind of create, momentum behind something from a stand start. I think the challenge with all those ideas are all positive and we need to do them. You need to create a podcast. You need to develop a lot of content on your, blog and have a digital presence for the category. But you need to be able to take all of that and tie it to somewhere on the funnel. And what I talk about in the book is how that shows up in the funnel. So for us, doing something like an event, for example, helps us convert people into our marketable database, where ultimately we would not have had that opportunity beforehand, by having having some partners kind of drive their folks, having our venture capital, our investors invite their portfolios. We were able to get people into the profession, into our database, and therefore access to our brand. And so we measure things like how many conversions on a unique account basis have we brought into the database this week. And we looked at that again every week for seven years now to get a sense of our brand's ability to actually drive engagement over time. We've gotten pretty good at then saying, how do we get those folks to ultimately buy? So how do we look for buying intent? Do we score those leads? Some of the more traditional kind of demand gen things. When do SDRs reach out and to whom and with what message? All of those different things are, quote, demand gen kind of prototypical types of investments that we have to be able to prove. But doing it through the lens of the new category, you just need some language to be able to have that dialogue with your CEO and CFO. But unless they believe, I think this is the important part, unless they buy into the vision, it's going to be really hard to kind of get them to see that language as truth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I have another topic that I'm super curious about. So you joined Gainsight. That was your first marketing job, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So what is your thought process over 7 years? Again, and I'm asking because there's a series, there's conventional wisdom that there are stage appropriate leaders and that there is a marketing or sales leader for the early stage and for the mid stage. Even, I was at a conference in Chicago and somebody asked the question to the audience, when is the right time to fire your VP of sales? And this was all sales executives in the audience. It was very strange to me that this was the main question. And then there was a famous venture capitalist who I'm sure who said as soon as they missed their number. So that was a great vibe for the room. How do you approach your job every day, knowing that that's the conventional wisdom, and still what did you do to make yourself the right person for every single stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that does make sense, and I think it is conventional wisdom for a reason. I think it's this idea that people just form really good kind of habits and muscle memory around different parts of the startup life cycle. teen Zoe from Zora has a great article about, I think it's called The Climb, about just, these different kind of, running a startup is basically a different set of crises at every turn, and the ability to kind of manage one crisis and move on to the next one. And so I think people just build their 10,000 hours in a certain phase of that climb. For me personally, this was like one of my primary motivators. Is I think I brought in some imposter syndrome into the job, just being, honestly, a first-time marketer, that I wanted to prove to myself and to, my CEO and all these folks that I could scale, that I could kind of break through that conventional wisdom. And so some of honestly, it was the awareness of knowing that's kind of something that I had and felt at the forefront of my thoughts. B, that I was asking my CEO for feedback and transparency along the way. And so, developed a thick skin over time where I can get the hard kind of feedback and be able to take that, not take it personally, internalize it and make some changes. And so being able to kind of bend to where the business needed me to go was a big part of it. Third, I actually, super fortunate, I was able to get an executive coach along the way, because he helped me realize that I both had blind spots in the marketer that I wanted to become, where I might have had more of this kind of maybe natural tendency around the brand stuff, but I really had to grow into the demand gen kind of awareness, and, to use the words of one of my mentors, like to don the chief pipeline officer cape. That was something that I had to really grow into and didn't have intuitively and naturally. And so an executive coach helped me see through that. And then honestly, hiring to my weaknesses. So being able to build out a big team that might have had more experience than me in certain kind of functional parts of marketing, and not have the ego of saying, look, I need to be the most, senior person in the room. That's not the case at all. And so those were some of the things that helped, I think, along the way. But I mean, quite frankly, I decided, to opt out, at this kind of next stage of company, because I felt like I did kind of what I wanted to do at Gainsight, and I wanted to go and do it again. And so I think there's decharging that a little bit and offering a moment of vulnerability and saying, where do you see yourself scaling? What parts of the journey do you love working on most? And where do you think you can add the most value? And being okay with, being able to kind of focus in on that part, if that's what you want to do.
What's the toughest piece of feedback that you got from your CEO, or that wasn't like, hey, you need to learn how pipelines work, but like, what was something more fundamental that you really focused on fixing?
Yeah, I'm smiling because I don't know if I could say it on there. Nick's awesome, by the way. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just you get some raw. There's some moments, right, where you're really kind of there's a lot of personal buy-in to a certain idea, and then it's hard to sort of separate yourself from that. The hardest ones for me always involved the people. It always involved my team, or hard trade-offs you'd have to make, whether that means potentially moving away from someone on the team, like parting ways with them, or probably the harder one is the word up level, right? Like I've sort of chased the ghost of not being hired over as a CMO, but then there are folks on my team that kind of shared that same ambition in their own kind of respective career journeys. And so the idea of needing to up level in certain areas was something that I think I struggled with, separating what my heart was telling me with kind of what some of these folks really wanted to do and wanted other careers and wanted other time with us, and what I think the business needed at that particular moment. And so those are some hard kind of decisions we'd have to work through, and honestly, like harder conversations to go out and execute.
Yeah. And I ask because there are recurring themes that I received in feedback over the years, and it's always a question of, is that something I can really modify, or is it something I just need to accommodate in some way?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think on that note, like there's kind of two pieces of conflicting advice of like focusing in on your strengths, and then trying to turn some of your weaknesses or growth areas into strengths. And I've seen that play out as well, where sometimes it's hard to know which one to do, which one to focus on.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I feel like focusing on turning weaknesses into strengths, you're pushing a boulder up, you're fighting against genetics. That's sometimes, right. your DNA or early childhood trauma or whatever.
Totally.
Anthony, this has been amazing. We've got a few minutes left. And in this last part of the show, what we like to do is pay it forward. We like to know, who are your mentors? What is the who are the books that you're reading that you didn't write? Like, where should we go to follow the journey if we want to keep learning and keep improving and keep developing? Who are some of the people and ideas that have influenced you?
Yeah, thanks so much. We talked about Nick a lot on the show indirectly. I'll have to give him a text message after this. He is probably the single most important career mentor of my life. Honestly, I've been very fortunate to work with him, for him at 2 companies, and I've tried to adapt a lot of my leadership kind of learnings to what Nick taught me. So he's definitely, the person there on the leadership side. For like inspiration for any marketers listening, like honestly, the B2B marketing industry is it's changing. And I think the idea of like drawing inspiration from many places, I think there are some places we could look, but I think the best place to look for inspiration is the B2C world. When I see what Airbnb has done over the years, when I see what Disney's doing with Disney Plus right now, completely reinventing themselves, like that's where I get kind of the hair in the back of my neck standing up a little bit, and when I see kind of what, even outside of the context of technology companies, but like, late night TV, some of the innovation happening in digital media there, that's really where I get inspired to and kind of end up doing my best work, is trying to understand like what do the humans at home like want, how are they entertained? How do we reach them? How do we sustain them as a brand? And like realizing that those same humans go to work every day, and we can bring those same tactics into the workplace. And then what else? So I think those are some of the places I look, at least. And then just overall, I need to read a little bit more.
I'm sure you're good.
Yeah. I did a lot of writing. I took the year off reading so I can write. No, that's not true. But
did you set up like are you one of those people? Was it like a discipline you wrote from 9 to 11, and then you took a break and did your yoga and then meditated for 12 hours and then wrote another 5 hours?
No, honestly, I wish that was probably the missing recipe, actually. No, I had a very short window to write it. And so it was written over about 2.5 months, maybe 3 months. And so I knew I had to get to 60,000 words from the publisher. And so I just divided the book up into the pieces of the stories I wanted to tell, and then got to a place that was about 5,000 words a chapter. And so I tried to basically write an outline for each chapter and then write a chapter a day and just kind of wrestle with it. Honestly, it was everything from being at home with like a teething, 6-month-old baby, to like go into a coffee shop to just get out to that ambient noise. And so you kind of just wrestle through it each day, but you try to get to 5,000 words a day. That was kind of my way of getting through it.
Were you running like the word count little feature in Google Docs or something, like every 15 minutes?
Lived with it.
Yeah.
Lived with it.
That's awesome.
Man, I forgot it.
It's okay. Anthony, it's been great having you on the show. We're going to talk to you again on Friday. If folks are hearing this and are inspired and want to reach out to you, maybe to work at Front or just to follow along on the journey or seek some advice, are you open to that? And what's your preferred kind of contact medium?
Yeah, totally open to that. I think I would say LinkedIn, but gosh, it's getting so noisy these days. I think the best is probably on Twitter. Just, mention me on Kennada, Kennada on Twitter. And that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
I love it. That's cool. And that is a first. You're the first person that said that.
Nice.
Out of close to 100 episodes. Nice. Anthony, so much for being on the show. We'll talk to you again on Friday, but we really appreciate it. And congrats on the book. Oh, if people want to buy the book, Amazon?
Yeah. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold.
Cool. And it's called Category Creation.
That's right.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye. Hi, everybody. Sam Jacobs. It's Sam's Corner. Loved that interview with Anthony Kennada. Just a lot of knowledge, a lot of humility coupled with ambition. That's what we like to see in our leaders. And the story of, he started off as a recruiter, a technical recruiter, before moving to Box, I think as an SDR in the sales function. His first marketing job was at Gainsight. And from Gainsight, when he joined at 100,000 in ARR, he helped take that company past 100 million. I think he said 80% marketing generated and 100% marketing influenced. I mean, that's wild. It's amazing. He's got a new book out called Category Creation. I haven't read it yet, but I encourage everybody to go out there and read it. And what are the things we can learn from it? First of all, brands that create their own categories, companies that create their own categories earn higher multiples. They're more valuable. Gainsight created customer success. It's more valuable than the other companies that are also in the customer success world, universe. Second, you've got to take lessons from the B2C world. You've got to take those lessons of delight and surprise, and you've got to introduce them into your B2B marketing framework. It's not enough to do the same damn thing over and over again. Our white papers and our blogs, it's over, unfortunately, and you're going to have to think fresh and anew. Third thing is you're going to have to find a way to connect long-term greed, long-term brand development, category creation, and relate it to metrics that are measurable so that you can speak to the CFO and the CEO and so that you can make big bets and understand, and they can understand how they should be evaluating the ROI on those big bets. In the absence of that conversation with the CFO, is simply not going to be sufficient. And so I think that that's just a really important lesson. You know, Anthony mentioned they placed a $250,000 bet on Pulse, which is the Gainsight conference. And the company, they had $250,000 in venture capital funding. I would guess that their 8 customers were not sufficiently generating $250,000 in free cash at the time that the balance sheet wasn't impacted by that bet, but the team made the bet and they viewed it within the long-term lens. The way that you do that is that everybody in the company is on the journey, is on the path. He mentioned Simon Sinek and starting with why. So if you can create a category, I think it's a special thing. At Revenue Collective, the company that I run during the day, we're trying to create a category. We're trying to create career enablement as a category, not sales enablement, not marketing enablement, but career enablement. The category of tools, suites, and services that enable individuals, not companies, but individuals to more successfully manage their career. We'll see if we're successful, but that's what happens when you're trying to do something new and different. You don't want to be bucketed into sales meetup groups if you're Revenue Collective. If you're Front, you don't want to be bucketed into, at this point, collaboration tools or productivity collaboration tools, because that's a world that has many, many other competitors. So when you're thinking about building a really, really big company with a really, really big idea, think about what you can do to create that category. Hope that's been useful. If you want to reach out to me, you can. It's linkedin.com/in/Sam F. Jacobs. We want to thank our sponsors, of course. The first is DocuSign. Execute contracts and get to revenue faster with DocuSign, used by employees at 90% of the Fortune 500. Learn more at go.docusign.com/saleshacker. And our second sponsor is, of course, Outreach, the leading sales engagement platform. If you want to reach me anytime, you know the instructions. Otherwise, I will talk to you next time.